Welcome to the Tzurba M'Rabanan Hilchot Shabbat Program with Rabbi Shalom Rosner. Tzurba is a revolutionary halacha sefer which guides you through over 300 topics in Jewish law in a unique signature style. In this weekly series specifically, Rabbi Shalom Rosner learns through the Tzurba Hilchot Shabbat volumes, helping us all master the Halachot of Shabbat in just 2 years. Tzurba volumes are available for purchase worldwide on Amazon. And to learn more about Tzurba, or for those in Eretz Yisrael looking to purchase volumes, please head over to tzurbaolami.com. For more information, see the description below. And now, Rabbi Shalom Rosner.
Okay, let us get into the next Shiur. We started the Tzurba Volume 21 volume last time, and we're in the second Shiur. This is the Mervis family volume, again, the Lax family edition of all of the volumes of Tzurba. And we get into a lot of other, or many other malachas relating to very lamaisa cases in terms of asiyas ohel. That's what we're into, and melabain, and tofer, korea, kosher, mochek, so much that we have to learn. But again, as we've said, Hilchot Shabbos is finite. It's not endless, and there's always new applications. But once we're familiar with the Yisodos, with the rules, then at least we know what to look for and what to ask, and what's a shayla and what's not a shayla. And we'll even know some halacha l'maisa cases we'll get into today. So we mentioned last time, we know there's a malacha of bona, the araisa, you're not allowed to build, you're not allowed to destroy, bona and soser. But that doesn't only apply on the daraisa level, but even on the durabanan level, making an ohel, making a temporary ohel, that's also asur durabanan, to create an ohel. We saw last time to add on to a temporary ohel, that's a machlokes, and we paskin that's allowed. That's a machlokas tanoi. It's allowed to add onto a temporary ohel. So if you have an ohel that's a roof that's already a tefach wide, you could stretch it. You could add to it. We said an awning or a plastic on a baby stroller, something like that. So then that would be allowed to be mosif onto an ohel arai. So now we're getting to other related halachas relating to ohel. So number one is an important lamaisa halacha, and that is about changing the order. We're on page 40. We're going to start in this year, page 40. We're going to start with the Gemara Maseches Beitza. So we learned that you're not allowed to make an ohel arai on Shabbos. That's an Isser D'Rabanan. Says the Gemara in Beitza Lamed Beis, but because it's only Isser D'Rabanan, Chazal weren't only focused on the result, but on the way you build. So if you build it in an unusual way, the whole thing is D'Rabanan. So if you build it in an unusual way, then it's going to be mutter. Meaning a da'oraisa that we do in an unusual way usually makes it from a da'oraisa to a d'Rabanan. But is this d'Rabanan? Not every d'Rabanan done in an unusual way is going to be mutter. But this one, making an ohel arai in an unusual way, is going to be mutter. What's an unusual way? Switch the order. Usually, how do you build something that's a roof? You build walls and you put a roof on top of it. If you build the roof and then the walls, that's mutter. How do you build the roof and the walls? You hold it in thin air, and then you put something under it, as we'll get to. The kids want to make a tent. Put the blanket, get 2 kids to hold the blanket, and then move the chairs underneath. We're going to see that's allowed, right? If you put the chairs and put the blanket on top, that's a problem. But if the walls are there, I don't know, let's say a ping pong table. A ping pong table, you have the roof already. No walls. And then you want to put the blankets on the sides? That's okay, because that's the opposite way of normal building. So it says the Gemara Maseches Beitza, source 29, here on page 40. Amar Rav Yehuda. Hi Medurta, right? This Medura is talking about the wood that you're building for a bonfire. Again, bonfire on Yantif, obviously, not making bonfires on Shabbos, but on Yantif, Hi Medurta, Milamala Lamata Shari. If you build it from up to top to bottom, you put the upper level, the roof on first, that's mutter. Milamata lamala aser, but bottom to top is aser. V'chein biasa, also if you're going to make like a tripod to put an egg. V'chein kedera, v'chein puria, bed, v'chein chavita, barrel. In all of these types of structures, if you do the top before the bottom, that would be allowed. And that's what the Shulchan Aruch says. Shulchan Aruch paskins that way. Shulchan Aruch says in source 30, Mita, kisha amamidinosa, when setting up the bed, which is asiyas ohel arai, right? There's nothing there beforehand. Also, laniach haraglayim, we'll see. We're talking about the type of bed that has walls under it. Also, laniach haraglayim tchila v'alaniach alem krashim. You can't do first the bottom and then the top. That's building and all arai. Eliyasam krashim tchila ba'avir. First hold the boards in the air. V'achar kach haraglayim tachtehen. Asiyas all arai on Shabbos is mutter if it's in the opposite. Order. Is this mutter even? I already gave examples of this. I gave it away. But the case of the bed is where you're using what's on top. or the case of the egg, the case of the bonfire, you're using the space on top. Does this heter of flipping the order help even if you're doing it dafka to create the space on the bottom? Says the Chazon Ish, yes. And that's the Chazon Ish in source 31. Remember the Chazon Ish, Avram Yeshayahu Karelitz. That's what Ish stands for, the Chazon, the vision of Ish. V'davka ba'osem mikedem haraglayim v'machitzas. If you, the only time it's a problem is if you make the legs first. Aval mutter ladam lechos agag biyado, but you can hold the roof. V'lasim achar kach tachta haraglayim, then you put the legs underneath. V'yafilos ilitzel, even if you're doing it for shadow, to get shade underneath, v'ika matuach, and it's stretched out, it's still going to be mutter. It's still going to be mutter. And the Haruch HaShabbos also passes like that. Heter zeshel asiyas ohel arai aydei shinui nemer gam ba'ohel asui lahagei. Not only if you're going to use what's on top, the space, but also on the bottom. Remember, this does not help for a binyan daraisa. If you're building something permanent, the binyan keva, doesn't matter what order it is, it's still going to be a problem. But this asiyas ohel arai, this is the Rabbanan, so then that's going to help with the opposite order. Okay. What exactly is an ohel? So we've been talking about a full structure with a roof and walls. What if you only have one or the other? So first we're going to talk about one, if you have the roof without the walls, and then a little bit later we're going to talk about the walls without the roof. Right? Is that going to be a mechitza on Shabbos? So first you have on page 42, a roof, a canopy without walls. Says the Tosfos. Tosfos quotes, it's mutter to assemble. If you have a table on benches, on like a table that we kind of have, like our tables, even if it's going to be an ohel, because there are no walls, right? The definition of an ohel to Tosfos seems to be that if there are walls and an ohel, if you only have an ohel, you only have the roof on top, is that a problem? Tosfos says, Heicha, heichi. This is Tosfos Alam and Beis on that Gemara that we saw back in the earlier source. Heichi b'sadrin shulchan she'en la raglayim al gavi safsalim shalo. How do we put our tables? Why? Because there the Gemara says you can flip the order, but you don't flip the order. You have the benches, then you put the table on top. You're putting the board on top. It says, because there are no walls, it's mutter. That's Tosfos. Tosfos says, if there are no walls, mutter. Wow, is that a full-fledged hesder? Right? Tosfos says, it's mutter. The Shulchan Aruch quotes that Mitak, Shamidinosa, that same Shulchan Aruch that we saw before. Now we're going to see the continuation of it. It's quoted again in 34. Right, that we say you have to switch the order. Switch the order if you have walls. Then put up the roof first, then the walls. But if you don't have any walls, so then it doesn't matter. You could put the roof on. If you don't have any walls, what's a structure? What's an ohel? An ohel is not just a roof. An ohel has walls. And the Tosfos says, if you're making a full ohel, the Gemara says, if you're making a full ohel arah, you have to flip the order to make it mutter. And if you don't flip it, it's a problem. If you put walls and a roof on top, that's a problem. But if there are no walls, it's allowed because that's not called a structure. And that's what the Mishnah Berurah says in 35. Even though regarding a binyan keva, Bonet daraisa, avim asa eze davar mashu lahosif ala binyan beina mechitzas ubevera chayev. Every little bit is going to be chayev for a case of binyan daraisa. But mikol makom regarding the world of all arai, leading all arai lo asru baoses hagag lachud. The iser is not if you make only a roof. Im lo shaoses hagag kedei lahagim b'bnei achama l'kshem achayotzibo, unless the purpose is for underneath. When Tosfos says that if there are no legs, you can just do it straight. If there are no walls, do it straight and regular. That's only if your ultimate purpose is for on top. For on top, a table, a bed, it's on top. But if your kavanah is for underneath, then that explains the Mishnah Berurah that even without walls, it has a smach. It's in the world of ohel, and therefore it would still be a problem, right? But if you're doing it, read it again. If you're just doing the roof, so then it's not a problem unless your purpose is lahagin. As I said, then it's a little smacks of being a little bit in the world of ohel. The Mishnah Berurah quotes a chumrah of the Taz. That if one, based on what we just said, that if one uses the area under the roof, and that's why you made it, If you're going to use the area, even not dafka for shade or for protection, but if you're going to use the area underneath, then it is asur to put it up, even if it only has 2 walls. Even if just 2 walls. Says the Mishnah Berurah in the name of the Taz. Again, the Taz on this Shulchan Aruch in Shin Tes Vav, but the Taz says, again, if it has no walls, so then maybe it's even more iffy. If you're going to use it for protection, that's what the Mishnah Berurah just said. If you use it for protection or shade, so then even no walls could be a problem. But if you're not using it for protection or shade, but you might use it, I don't know, like to put shoes under, as we'll see. So that's the Mishnah Berurah. To be if you have a bed where the airspace underneath is used for shoes and the like, that is asur even if you have only 2 walls, because that's enough to be an all arai. You build 2 walls with a roof on top, and you use under it. Says the Taz, that's enough. 2 walls, not 4 walls. Even though you're not doing it for shade, like to always, that the ikr usage isn't for under, right? We're saying the ikr usage is for on top, a bed to sleep on, but you also happen to use it. That's the chumrah of the Taz. You happen to use what's underneath, even though the ikr is on top. If it has 2 walls, that would be a problem. And he says, Nachal lahachmir, l'chadchila, one should be machmir for this Taz. The Bir Halacha quotes the Rashba, that's even more machmir. The Rashba is more machmir than the Taz, who says that it's also to put any covering even without walls, right? If it's going to be used for some purpose. Again, the Taz says if the ikr is on top, if you're going to use the bottom for any purpose, 2 walls, that's a problem. The Rashba says, the Bir Halacha says, if you're going to use it for any purpose underneath, even no walls. Even no walls. The Bir Halacha in 37. Asur afilu below mechitzos. The alkein, therefore, b'midah shalanu gamkein asur. Our bed, says the Bir Halacha. The mishtamish baviro b'hanachas minalmi. Everybody puts their shoes under their beds. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't say that. The Shulchan Aruch didn't say that if you happen to use it, right? The Mishnah Berurah said if there are no legs, then it's going to be mutter. If there are no legs, it's going to be mutter. And he says, we should do davar shel divrayim, because makom l'chadchila nireh shetov lachor shel divrei harashba, the divrei harashba. Lamaisa, how does this translate all till today? So let's get into some cases. Let's say putting up a folding table, mutter. You're allowed to put up a folding table on Shabbos. You're allowed to open up a folding chair on Shabbos. There are no walls there, right? It's just the ikr is on top. You're going to stick the chairs, and the chairs are going to fit under the table. That's okay. That's okay, that's allowed. The ikr is on top, even if there is some usage underneath. Says the Shmir Shabbos Kelchasa. Source 38, on page 44. Shulchan Ragilim Raglayim. Again, if you have a table that has walls for some reason, I don't know, you have some type of a wall table, that would be more of a problem. But Shulchan Ragilim Raglayim Arba Pinosav. Im Raglios Bishteit Stadim. You have legs on the side or in the 4 corners. Mutter Bechol Ofan Laha'amida V'gam Lafarko. It's an arai. It's in the world of arais. You know, it's d'Rabbanan, and it has no legs, no walls, just legs. V'gamim rov haraglayim or raglayos utefach hayoser, even if they're a little tefach wide. But let's say other lamaisa cases. You look at the Simcha Bunim Cohen in 39. It is forbidden for children to drape a blanket over 2 chairs on Shabbos in order to make a tent with which to play, right? Because you have the chairs; it goes up, and the blanket hangs over. Those are walls also, right? The blanket is being used, and the purpose is for what's underneath. The purpose is what's underneath, and it's going to have the Taz says 2 walls. And that Taz even more mach. Taz is even if it's a secondary reason. Here, the ikr is for the shade underneath, and therefore it will be a problem. But as we mentioned, and Rav Malamed says it here, beferish, if you switch the order, it would be okay. Switch the order. Have the kids say, you want to make the tent? So everybody should hold the blanket up beforehand, then move the chairs underneath. That will be okay. If you change the way that it's put up, it's asur for children to spread a blanket over the chairs Ohel in order to create the Ohel. If you first stretch the blanket, then it'll be mutter. That's again Ohel arai, creating an Ohel arai in the opposite order. So that was a little bit about creating an Ohel without the walls. What happens if you have the walls, but the walls were there from before Shabbos? Does that make a difference? If you're just doing the Ohel, but the other cases earlier, you don't have walls. Here, what happens if the walls were there before Shabbos? So Tosfos seems to say, the same Tosfos that we saw before, but you have it there here again in 41, that if they're before Shabbos, then it's not a problem. You could put the roof on Shabbos, right? Based on what's the Raya? Right? The Gemara talks about Hachzara. Remember in the Bishul Sugyas? Hachzara, you could put a pot on an oven. A pot on an oven on Shabbos. Remember the oven in those days, it was a hole on top, and you created an Ohel. So why are you allowed to do that? Says Tosfos, it must be that if the walls are there before Shabbos, you're okay. V'tema, asked Tosfos in 41. D'amar b'Shabbos, machzirin kedera gabi kira. You're allowed to put a pot on a kira. V'hasam ka'amar madis le machzirin afilu b'Shabbos machzirin. We said we have all the conditions of achzara. Remember the 5 conditions we spoke about? Daito lahachzir, oda biyado. But nobody talks about the problem, that there is a problem of putting a pot on a hole in the oven and you're creating an Ohel. Nobody says that. Nobody brings that up. Says Tosfos, why? Aren't you creating an Ohel now? V'yesh lomer, says Tosfos, to kol hanach ina asurin elahecha. All these asiyas Ohels are only asur elahecha shemesakina Ohel v'hamachitzos. Both. Avalam asa Ohel below mechitzos shari. But if you make an Ohel without mechitzos, so then it is allowed. V'hasam gabi kira hamachitzos yisus mitchila. For the kira also, the mechitzos are made beforehand. The mitzvahs of mechitzos are made beforehand, so therefore you're just adding on. And the Mishnah Berurah quotes this heter: "Linyan asiyas ohel lo asru ba'ose es hagag lachud im lo shos es hagag k'di lahagid b'nei chaver l'kshav v'chayotze bo." Right, unless it's for underneath. The azhav iksas b'mechidas ohel. Like we said, if it's for underneath, then it still smacks of all. It's going to be also d'Rabbanan. Like you might say in the kids' case, the chairs are there before Shabbos. You're just putting the blanket on. No, but you're doing it for what's underneath. The place of the pots. You're not creating anything underneath in that oven. You're not using that you're just using what's on top. Right? So therefore the Mishnah Berurah says, though, this type of case where the walls are there before Shabbos and you're creating an Ohel just for what's on top, so that is not a problem. That is not a problem. Doesn't make sense. Good. What happens, the next related case, and again it's related before we get to the opposite case, what about if you have an enclosure, like the oven case that we just said, that the airspace is not used, right? It's mashma from Tosfos that we just saw, that maybe it's asur d'Rabbanan if you want to use the space underneath, right? The Mishnah Berurah says, if you want to use it, if you're doing it lahagain, that would be a problem. So it sounds like it doesn't mean d'Rabbanan to construct the Ohel, even if one, does. It sounds like you can't construct even the walls and the Ohel, even if you're not going to use what's underneath. It sounds like that. We had that mashmas even beforehand. And the Mishnah Berurah quotes that again, if it's going to be used underneath. The Shulchan Aruch rules a little more mekel than Tosfos, like the Rashba, who allows if you're creating an Ohel with even walls and a roof, if you're totally not interested in what's underneath. Right, the Tosfos and the Mishnah that we just saw sounds like L'chumra, but the Shulchan Aruch says books. What happens if you have piles of books? You have 2 books, and then you want to put one on top and create like a pyramid. Do you have to be worried about that space underneath? No. Right, the Shulchan Aruch seems to say that if you're creating a whole entire Ohel, but not for underneath. Most of the time, what do you create these structures for? Right, you have an awning or the thing on the stroller, the plastic, that's for underneath. That's why it's a problem. But what if you're creating a situation of Ohel just for what's on top? So Mishnah Berurah says, 45. Muter laniach sefer echan mikan, ve'echan mikan, ve'echan al gabeim. You can make a pyramid of books. Hoel ve'ein tzarach la'avir shetachteihem. You can make it if your entire Ohel arai, says the Shulchan Aruch, is for what's on top, not what's underneath. It's he holds this mutter. Again, the Mishnah Berurah said seems to be machmir, but it's mutter. Right, that's why based on this, the Mishnah Berurah says, what about putting on a tablecloth on Shabbos? Putting on a tablecloth, right? It hangs down. All of a sudden, you added walls. So you might say, oh, maybe this is the opposite order. So you have that heter, maybe, because here you made the roof before the walls. So mistama, that's a good heter. But the Mishnah Berurah also says, because you're not interested in what's underneath. The Mishnah Berurah in 46. Shit Tesvav. Mizeh tamnami shari lifros mapa ala shulchan. The kitzvos hamapa teluyos lamata min shulchan. Right, the edges of the tablecloth are hanging down. Mikol tzad. Vafilu magios muchas la'aretz. Even if it comes close to the ground, the ein bazeh mishum ohel. Kiva de yitzorach la'avir shtachas hashulchan. You're not interested in what's underneath. Va'od. V'kivan shema shemunach ala shulchan ein bo mishum ohel she'ein sham chalal bein ala shulchan mutar gam hayaz mimenu. Between the tablecloth and the table, there's no tefach. So there's no ohel there. So once there's no ohel on top, there's no ohel for the sides either. And you see the pictures there about this issue. Okay, one or two other points relating to ohel. First, we're still talking about making the roof, and then we got to talk about just making the walls. Making the roof. There is a discussion, a surprising discussion. What about wearing a hat? What about wearing a hat on Shabbos? Do I have to be worried? Again, all I have to be at least a tefach. What if my hat brim goes off my forehead a tefach wide? Do I have to be worried about that? You might think, come on, that can't be. That can't be. Well, we say an umbrella is a problem, right? We said before in the last year. So what about a hat? So the Gemara says, Shabbos, it's discussed in the Gemara. Shabbos kufla meches. Amar Rav Sheshes Breder Rav Idi, Hai Siana Shari. Siana is a felt hat. It's mutter. V'yitmar Siana aser. It's on the Bryce says it's aser. Lokasha had the ispei tefach had the ispei tefach. So far, sounds like there's a problem if it's a tefach wide. Tefach is not so big. So why? Because that would be asiyas ohel arai. I'm creating a roof. A roof for what? For what's underneath. We said if you're doing it for what's underneath, it could be a problem. For Elamayata says the Gemara, Sharbi of Glima Tefach Anami the Mechayev. What if I just unrolled a garment, a tefach? You're going to say that's chayiv? Elalo kasha. No. Hadim mahadik, hadalo mahadik. No, here it's tied, here it's not tied. That's how you answer the steer and the brises. What's the answer? So Shitas Rashi saying the Gemara's maskana is hats are never ohel. The issue here is there a chash that the hat's going to fall off and I might come to carry it. So if it's mahadik, if it's tied on my head, then it's mutter. I'm not worried it's going to fall off. If it's not tied on my head, then it's usher. But some ohel, there's nothing to talk about. According to Rashi, the Gemara's maskana is there's no issue of ohel by wearing a hat. But Rabbi Hananel argues. Rabbi Hananel says, no. It's a different type of, the Gemara is giving a different answer. Rabbi Hananel is saying that there is an issue of asiyas ohel by a hat on Shabbos. Says Rabbi Hananel, 48. Kova, Saina. Kova shemesibim b'nei adam roshay and yotzekim in pesel min harosh. The brim goes out, kashir tefach o yeser. The anan rinu panim rabos. We've seen it. The chosin also ohel upon him, and it's protecting your face from the sun, from the rain, from the elements. Ukshehu mehudak biyoser v'ero nichpach kebeged chashav gol v'aser. Rabbi Yochanan flips when it's tight and it's not soft and flimsy. It's tight. That's a prop that makes it more of an ohel. When it's loose and it's flimsy and it's shaking around, that's not such an ohel. That's how Rabbi Yochanan understands. The more tight it is, the worse it is, because that's not a beged. It's not flimsy. And it's a Rabbi Yochanan. Shulchan Aruch passes like Rabbi Yochanan. Shulchan Aruch says, Kovashu mispashi lahalan meirosho, source 49. If one has a hat that stretches out a tefach, Aser lanicha barosha fil babayis. Forget outside, in your house. In your house, mishum ohel, it could be a problem. So this is a problem, because there are many Jews out there that wear hats. Forget outside, inside. So how could we understand this? So the Taz saves the minhag of Klal Yisrael, that it's a hat is only a problem if it's worn for sale or other type of protection. But if it's worn for religious purposes, if it's worn for style, if it's worn for fashion, so that's not a problem. That's not a problem that's not ohel. Again, the whole thing here is in this is Rabbanan Vasiyas ohel, and there are no walls here. And why are you making it? So if you're not making it for a purpose of an ohel, you're making it for covering your head for davening. You're making it for the style. That wouldn't be a problem. Says the Taz, v'nirli lamed heter bazel kuli alma. The mitzad kohel. First of all, according to Rashi, it's for sure not a problem. But Rabbi Yochanan is quoting the Shulchan Aruch. But says the Taz, the mitzad ohel ein kaniser to al kol panim lavi yisadaraisa to lavi all keva el arayu pater avalaser. The most we're talking about is the Rabbanan. Yesh lanu lomar to lo aser lahecha sheish heker ba'asiyas ohel arai. It has to be something Ohel related. Dainu bakova shu asui beged shemisatif bo harosh. Ela shemotzi saper achav makom klos habeged v'nira lakol. If it's clear to all that it's there for kedei lahagein velasas Ohel, for protection. Aval bebrittel shalanu, but our types of hats, says the Taz, they're soft. To kula b'shetach echadu. It's to cover the head. The Yikar Lachasas Baruch is to cover the head, not for the brim to happen to go out. The most of the head is to cover the head. The EF Shalachasas Rosho Bechelik Mimenu Kim B'Emso. But it happens to be that you wear a hat and the middle part of the hat is covering your head and the rest sticks out. Okay. But that's not the reason. That sticking out part is not the ikr of what you're doing. Sometimes there's not even a tefach in front, but even if it is, there shouldn't be any issues of ohel. But that ends the Taz. But if you are doing it for protection, for an ohel, like it's sunny or there are bugs, right? There are bugs, says the Taz at the end of source 50. Okay, nearly demisha mitzar and also zevuvim b'Shabbos. V'u'ena lavush b'brittel v'lokeach ha'brittel. You took it dafka for that type of protection. So maybe there would be a problem. There would be a problem of ohel. The Elio Rabbah thinks also similar. Ubrittel shalanu kasvataz b'tor mishum davar shem miskavein. He quotes that Maharil, the Hilchas Karashi. Wow. Maharil quotes the Minhag Olam is against the Shulchan Aruch like Rashi. Ein Bekova Isser Ohel Klal. The Lokish Shulchan Aruch v'lavush Basku Karabam v'ani Yosef Shurisi b'Shvali Alekev Sefer Tanya Redakersha b'Dashai Yisbag Ram Pasku. Many paskin like Rashi, and therefore Ein Lahachmir Klal. And that seems to be the Minhag Olam. Minhag Olam is against the Shulchan Aruch like Rashi. Again, the Mishnah Berurah quotes the Chumrah at the end of the Taz that if you're doing it for protection from bugs, it would be a problem. But again, this is seems to be the minhag olam is to be mekel. The Aruch HaShabbos ends off that the Efshel Lefizem Yilbash Kovash called Iker Kavanasul L'Shem Tzel. If you're wearing a type of hat that is, I don't know, a very wide brim that you would go on a teal with, a straw hat that has the stuff sticking out from the sides, maybe that would be a problem. We're talking about regular hats that you wear for fashion, you wear for religious purposes. That all is not a problem. The Aruch HaShabbos says maybe if you wear it all the way out, it will be a problem. According to Rashi, it's mutter anyway. The Rashi is mutter anyway, but one should keep that in mind. Then you have a nice summary on page 52 of everything we've discussed so far. Again, about Ohel Arai. If somebody makes an Ohel with 4 walls and a roof, and you're planning to use what's underneath, that's an Issa D'Rabbanan on Shabbos. Right? What about 4 walls and a roof, but you're not planning to use what's underneath? Tosfos seems to say it's Aser, but most assume the Shulchan Aruch quoted that in the Rashi. Remember, making a whole Ohel with a roof and walls, but to use what's on top. So the Tosfos seems to say it's Aser, but the Shulchan Aruch seems to say that is Mutter. What about 2 walls and a roof, and the airspace will be used, but even not dafka for the Iker? That was the Chumrah of the Taz. What about a roof only? Roof only, and not going to use the airspace? Mutter. Roof only, and it's going to be used, Asur, we said, other purposes, the Chulu. Okay, what about, last section, we're not talking about the roof, but we're talking about the other part of the OL, just walls. Just walls. We spoke about just roof. What about just walls? So that is Machlokas Rishonim. Machlokas Rishonim, Rashi. Rashi says, Dafka Gag. Rashi, Shabbos Kuf Chav Hey, 54. Avo Mechitza Lavo Elhu. V'shari lefarso litznius. Just walls is not an issue, as long as it's certain walls. V'shari lefarso litznius. You can put up a wall if it's just for tznius. It's just for privacy. That is shitas Rashi. That is not called in Ohel. Not called in Ohel. Tosfos argues with Rashi based on the Gemara in Eruvin. The Gemara in Eruvin is mechalek and says no. There are certain walls that you cannot make. The difference between a 3rd wall and a 4th wall in a sukkah. That's what the Gemara says at the end of Eruvin Mem Dalet and Aleph, asking first there's a stira, whether you can make a wall. So Lo Kasha says the Gemara, Habedofan Shlishis, Habedofan Revius. 3rd wall versus the 4th. What's the difference? 3rd wall versus the 4th wall. A sukkah is kosher with 2 and a little. The 3rd wall is machshir the sukkah. What's the Gemara saying? The Gemara is saying that if you have a wall that is halachically significant, so that's a problem. That's a problem to make. That's called a mechitza hamateres, and that would be a problem to make on Shabbos because it has accomplished something. It gives a chashivus. But the 4th one, once you have a sukkah of 3 walls, the 4th one is just there for privacy. That's not halachically doing anything. and therefore it's going to be mutter. And that's what Rabbeinu Tam says. If you look in Tosfos, Rabbeinu Tam quotes that if it's going to meant to be matir, like the wall of a sukkah, it's going to be usher. If it's just meant for tznius purposes, privacy, it's going to be allowed. Says Tosfos, Vakasha, source 56. Tosfos argues on Rashi. No, there's problems of Ohel even for just a wall. Kedisa be'erevin, the Gemara Erevin that we just saw. Gabi asiyas dofen sukkah, the parachasam. You can't answer dofen shlishi dosha revi. Says Rabbeinu Tam, the shaper shayach betfanos Ohel hecha de mechitza mo'elas laheter. Right, only if it is going to accomplish something halachically, that's going to be the problem of asiyas Ohel. Well, for a wall. Lahachi, bedofen shlishis davi mechitza umashli l'sukkah chashav asiyas Ohel. But the fourth wall doesn't accomplish anything. That's Shittas Rabbeinu Tam. We have a nice little biography. Rabbeinu Tam, we know, remember, Rabbeinu Tam's real name was Yaakov. Yaakov Ish Tam. He was the younger son. Right, he was 20 years younger than the Rashbam. The Rashbam, the Rivam, and Rabbeinu Tam were all brothers, sons of Rashi's daughter. Right, their father was Meir, Rashbam, Rabbeinu Shmuel ben Meir, the Rivam, Rabbi Yitzchak ben Meir, and Rabbeinu Yaakov ben Meir. Maybe he wasn't called the Rivam because that would have been the same name. So he got the nickname of Rabbeinu Tam. But the Shonar quotes like Rabbeinu Tam that walls are a problem if they are halachically constructive. Aser says the Shulchan Aruch and Shittas Vav Aleph. Aser lasas all b'Shabbos v'Yontav afilu hu arai. You're not allowed to make an ohel, as we know, even temporary. V'dafka gag aval mechitzas mutter. Only a roof is a problem, but walls aren't. Ve'ein mechitza asura ela imkein nasas lahatir sukkah or lahatir tiltal. Mechitza is asur only if it's accomplishing something. To be matir a sukkah, right, make a third wall, or tiltal, let's say you have an area on Shabbos that you're not allowed to carry in, and you put up the wall, that would be a problem. The Rama adds, aval mechitza nasas litznius ba'alma, but if you just make a wall for privacy, shari, that's going to be mutter. V'lachein, mutter litlos vilon lefnei Pesach. You can hang a curtain for privacy. What about the parochas? By the aron, you open the aron, you close the aron. You've now made an ohel. No, that's not accomplishing anything. That's not accomplishing anything. You could put up a wall because you want darkness. You want darkness in the or for keep the sun out. But again, if it's halachically significant, if a husband and wife want to be together and there's a light source or there are seforim there, you want to put up a mechitza to make the seforim considered halachically in a different rishus. So all of those, if it's halachically accomplishing something, so then that would be a problem. Again, the Mishnah Berurah notes if it's a permanent mechitza, we're talking about arai. If it's permanent, so then it's usher in any case. What's interesting is the Ramah seems to say, with Siyas Ba'alma, what about a mechitza in a shul? Let's say you have these rolling mechitzas. You want to separate between the men and the women to daven. So is that allowed? The minhag ha'olam is to be mekel. So don't you need a mechitza? You can't daven without a mechitza. So technically, even though Rav Moshe Feinstein has many tshuvas about mechitza, and the chiyuv of mechitza might be the chiyuv of separation between men and women during davening might be da'oraisa even, but the idea of a mechitza might be lehidur even more. Again, the idea is separation. So what is separation? Usually you need a mechitza to separate or else you'll be considered together. Again, we're not going to get to Hilchos Mechitza now. But it could be technically that as long as there's a sense of separation, let's say, what about the men in front of the women? You're not allowed to daven? If there are men and then behind the men are the women, so in that case, many would daven even without a mechitza. Again, you can put a mechitza there. You should put a mechitza there. But even if not, one would be allowed to daven. And if that's true, then the mechitza in these circumstances are litznius ba'alma. Again, we do it. Then we daven with a mechitza. But there is, it's not technically me'ikar adin a mechitza hamateres, and therefore you would be able to put it up on Shabbos, right? That's what the Aruch HaShabbos says. Aval mechitza she'ein materes mutar lamita b'Shabbos b'ofen arai. A mechitza that is not matir, you could put it up in an arai fashion. Could go in mechitza hanasis being gvarim l'nashim l'tfila, like the mechitza between men and women for tefillah. Venir, he says in the footnote, v'yav lafisha kasav, even according to the Igros Moshe, she's chiyav gamor al sham mechitza. There's a chiyav gamor between men and women. Mikol makom ein ze nechshav mechitza materes. It's still not mechitza materes, even though it's a chiyav. Why? Dahasam lo bin adine mechitza rak havdala litzarach tznius. A separation is needed. V'gam mechitza tluya sheish tachtei chalal gimel tfecha. Even a hanging mechitza, which is not called a wall, would be good enough. You just need some type of separation, and that's what the Shmir Shabbos summarizes cases of mechitzas hamateres that would be usher to make on Shabbos. Shmir Shabbos in 61, mechitza hamateres hizu shemamidim b'fnei sifrei kodesh kedei sheyeh mutar lahoshav sham tinok lasos rachav. You put a wall there in order for the child to be able to go to the bathroom, or around a chole to allow you to daven. You put the third wall, the sukkah, anything that is a mechitza materes would be a problem. But oslamed hey mechitza she'ein ba kol hatzanam ha'elu. If a mechitza doesn't have any of these conditions or accomplishments, or afilu yesh kol hatzanam ha'ela aval einhu mi'unyan ka'is b'mechitza materes, or it happens to be he's not interested in those results, mutar la'amida b'Shabbos. It's not coming to be matir anything, and that's the only time that Tosfos would say it is a problem. Again, Rashi seems to say no mechitza is a issue of Ohel. Again, I can figure out what he does with the Gemara and Eruvin, but Tosfos says a mechitza bateres would be a problem. Okay, Adkan, issues of Asiyas Ohel and Benias Ohel, the Keva arrive at Hashem. Next time we get into issues of milabain, cleaning, a very important halacha l'maisa discussion.